to Sweets, Treats, and Eats, the mini clinic. I'm Howie Morgasen. This is part 2 of the episode we are doing on meatballs. So if you remember back the last episode, we did a turkey meatball, we did a traditional Italian meatball, and we did buffalo chicken meatballs, and they were all excellent. And if you want to check them out, you can check out our YouTube channel and catch the back episode as well as other back episodes. So make sure you do that. So now, in this episode, we're going to do veggie meatballs. So for those of you that don't eat meat, this episode is for you. So today, first, we're going to do a cauliflower meatball. It sounds odd, but it's really delicious. So we start out with the star of the show, which is cauliflower. And what we did was we cooked it in salted water until it was fork tender. And then we now take it and we use our potato masher, which everybody usually has. If you don't have one, you can use a big spoon and accomplish the same thing. So what I want to do is just get in there and mash up the cauliflower as fine as we can get it. So you're looking for something that resembles sort of when you buy that riced cauliflower in the market. This is similar. So you just keep pushing it down. And the better you do it, the better the consistency of your meatball is. So we're gonna push that down, just make sure we have it all covered. And that's looking pretty good. So next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start adding our ingredients. So we're gonna add some parsley, and we're gonna add some Parmesan cheese, and we're gonna add an egg. So, and now we wanna mix it. So this is a very simple recipe. And there's two ways that you can actually cook them. You can cook them on top of the stove, fry them in oil, or you can make them in the oven. I'm gonna make it in the oven today because that's healthier. So now that we got that mixed, we're gonna add in our breadcrumbs. And we're gonna mix our breadcrumbs in. We also have some spices. So we have some salt, and we have some black pepper, and we have some garlic. So we're gonna mix that in, and the last thing we have is a little bit of flour. So we put the flour in, and we keep mixing, and I'm gonna keep mixing this to make sure it's all combined. And when we come back, I'm going to show you how to put the meatballs together, so stay with us. So we cooked the cauliflower, mashed it up, added all the other ingredients, and mixed it well, and that's what you wind up with. So now we're ready to make the meatballs. Just some caution, clean hands is something that I talk about all the time. Sorry if I belabor the point, but you are preparing food for family and for friends. So you have to make sure you don't want anybody getting sick by food that you're preparing. So make sure you have clean hands or gloves, either one is fine. So now we're gonna make some cauliflower meatballs. We have our scooper, it's a small one. Cauliflower meatballs are like an appetizer. So we're making a small meatball so you can serve it with toothpicks, similar to what we did with the buffalo chicken meatballs. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a scoop, of our cauliflower meatballs, and we're just going to round it like that. And so what I'm going to do is, this should make a nice tray of meatballs that I'm just going to, you don't have to do a lot of forming with these. They're a little fragile. So if you just sort of scoop it, the scoop does most of the work for you. You can just sort of take it out and form it a little bit and then put it on the tray. So we have it on parchment paper, because it's good for no stick. We're gonna spray the top of it with cooking spray so that it crisps up in the oven when we cook it. And then we're gonna put it in the oven at 400 degrees in 15 to 20 minutes. And then we're gonna show you what it looks like. So I'm just gonna keep scooping here. And then when we come back, we're gonna show you what the meatballs look like. So make sure you stay with us. So here we are. And here are our cauliflower meatballs. They came out great. So if you remember, we mashed the cauliflower, We added the spices, we added an egg, we added the cheese and the breadcrumbs, we mixed it all up, and then we put it in the oven. The recipe said you can either fry them in a pan on top of the stove, and I'm sure those are great, or you can put them in the oven. So these I made in the oven, and before I put it in the oven, I sprayed the top of it with cooking spray so that it would be crispy, and it worked. So if you look at one of these, you will see that there is crispiness and brown on the top. So these are great, and I made it so that it's like cocktail side or for an appetizer. So it'd be great for that. You can make them larger. If you're a vegetarian, you can make them larger and have it as part of a meal. So why don't we try it? It is crunchy and soft inside. Perfect. So you should really give these a try. They're excellent. For all your veggie friends, surprise them with it. I'm sure they will like it a lot. So coming up next on the episode, something special, spinach ricotta meatballs. So stay with us. Now on to the spinach ricotta meatballs. So there was a fair amount of prep required to make these, and I'm just going to take you through it quickly before we actually start making them. So this is, if you're Italian, it's ricotta. If you're not Italian, it's ricotta, which Italians laugh at. Nonetheless, it's ricotta cheese. It's Italian cheese. We're using whole milk because that's what the recipe calls for. There is a lot of water in this cheese. So what you need to do is take it out of the container, put it into a tea towel, and wring it as hard as you can to get as much moisture as you can out of it, so it makes it a little bit drier, as you can see. So we're going to put that in our bowl here. The next thing we have is spinach. So this is fresh spinach, and believe it or not, this was, if you know what spinach comes in, which is these large plastic bins, this was 1.5 bins, which is a fair amount of spinach. But when you cook it, and this is cooked in a little bit of olive oil and some garlic and some salt and pepper, it cooks down to this. And so after you cook it on the stove, you put it into a strainer, and with a spoon you push against it to get as much of the water as you can. Then you put it in the fridge for about 15 minutes to cool down. Then you take it out, and then you strain it again to get all of the moisture out of it. And that's what you wind up with. So the spinach goes in, and then we have some parsley, and this is flat leaf Italian parsley. Then we have some onions, and these are sweet onions, so Vidalia sweet onions. Then we have some Pecorino Romano cheese, that goes in. And then we have some eggs. And then we have some spices. So we have some garlic that we chopped up. We have a little bit of pepper, a little bit of salt, and then we have breadcrumbs. And I'm going to put some of the breadcrumbs in to start because the recipe says that you should mix it and sort of judge from the consistency of it whether it is formed enough to make the meatballs. And if it's not, then you can add some additional breadcrumbs into it. This still looks pretty moist from what I can see. So I'm going to add a little bit more of the breadcrumbs. And then I'm going to mix it some more. So I'll continue mixing this up. And then when we come back, we're going to make some meatballs. So stay with us. We finished mixing up our meatballs, so you can see they're well mixed, and we have spinach, ricotta, and parsley, onions, garlic, salt, pepper, all kinds of good stuff in there. So we have our scooper. This is a little bit bigger than the one we used for the cauliflower ones, because that was an appetizer. This could be a meal. So we're making it in tomato sauce. You can put it over pasta. So we're going to make them a little bigger. So we go in, we grab a scoop. Okay, we pull it out and we form it into our meatball like that. That looks pretty good. We go in, grab another one, So we wound up using all the breadcrumbs that the recipe called for, and that gave us the right consistency of it, but your mileage can vary, so whatever works for you is good. So I'm going to keep making these spinach ricotta meatballs here, and then I'll meet you at the stove where I'm going to put it in the tomato sauce. So stay with us. We're over at the stove, and as you can see, we made the meatballs, using the scooper. These are bigger than the cauliflower ones we did. And we got 18 meatballs out of this mixture that we made. We have a tomato sauce going on the stove. As I mentioned before, whenever a recipe calls for tomato sauce, if you have a favorite recipe for tomato sauce, you should use that. Or if you don't, you can go to the supermarket, pick up a jar of your favorite tomato sauce, and that's perfectly good to use as well. So we have tomato sauce bubbling away on the stove. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take the meatballs and we're going to lower them down into the sauce. We don't want to drop them in because that plops and that makes a mess. So what I'm going to do is continue to put these into the pot here, spread them out. And then these need to cook for 30 to 40 minutes. And then when they're done, we'll come back and we will show you what they look like. So stay with us. All right, we're just about done, but you can see how gorgeous these meatballs look in the sauce. They've got a little bit more cooking to do, and then we're going to try them, but we wanted to show you how good they were looking on the way to being done. So stay with us. Look at these. These are our meatballs that we put together. They have ricotta and they have spinach. We sprinkled a little cheese over the top because that's how Italians serve meatballs. But it looks just like a regular meatball. And so the recipe says you can serve it over pasta, which would be very nice, or you can serve it with toast, which is what we have over here. So why don't we cut into it and see what it looks like? So I'm gonna cut it. So keep in mind that these meatballs, and that looks great by the way, these meatballs are on the softer side. So when you have them in the pot, be careful. Probably don't recommend that you use a spoon to mix it while they're cooking. But if you take the pot, and what you can do is if you just sort of shimmy it around like this, make sure you have a cover on the top. And as you shimmy it around, the meatballs will move around inside the pot, and that'll get them mixed. And it needs the full 30 to 40 minutes for them to come out. You still have to treat them with kid gloves when you're handling them. I think one of them didn't make it, but that's all right because it actually mixed into the sauce. So spinach and ricotta and all the spices and stuff make a great sauce. You can serve that over pasta and it'll probably be yummy. So why don't we try this? Let's sort of make it a man-sized bite here, and let's try it. That is delicious. It's harder on the outside, it's nice and soft on the inside, so it makes a great meatball to put over pasta, so you really should try it. So coming up next will be the pièce de résistance eggplant meatballs, so make sure you stay tuned. We are in the home stretch, so the third meatball, veggie meatball that we're going to make today is an eggplant meatball, and as you can see here, I have cooked the eggplant. So what I did was I took a medium to large eggplant, I peeled it, and then I cut it up into little squares or dice. And then once I have that in a fry pan, I put some oil, and then I added onions and I added garlic. I let the onions and garlic cook for a couple of minutes to season the oil. Then I put the eggplant cubes in, and I mixed them around, and it took a good 8 to 10 minutes for the eggplant to cook. And so that's where I am right now. So I have the eggplant in a strainer over a bowl, and what you need to do is push down on the eggplant so you can get any excess water out of the eggplant. And because the reason you do that is because when you make the meatballs, you want them to be firm, and you want them, when you fry them, not to fall apart. So we're going to push down and around to make sure we get as much moisture as we can, out of our eggplant. So now what we'll do is we'll look, and you'll see there's some water in the bottom. And what we'll do is now we'll grab a large bowl and we'll put the eggplant in like that. And now what we'll do is we'll mash it up a little to make sure that we're getting a good consistency to make the meatballs. So this is similar to what we did in the last one, where we mashed up the cauliflower to make it nice and smooth so that when we make the meatballs, they'll make nice round meatballs and the center will be soft and lovely. So, okay, that looks pretty good. So what we'll do is now we're going to add some pecorino romano cheese. We're going to add some breadcrumbs. We're going to add some parsley, a little bit of black pepper, and a little bit of salt. And then some eggs. And now what we're going to do is we're going to mix it around and make sure it's well combined. So we're going to keep mixing it. So I'm going to keep mixing this, and when we come back, I'm going to show you how to make those luscious eggplant meatballs. So stay with us. So here I have the eggplant mix with all those good ingredients in it, ready to go. I have my scooper. I have the surprise that's going to go in the middle of the eggplant meatballs. That's a little mozzarella cheese. And then some breadcrumbs to roll it in, and then they go on the tray. So why don't we get started? I'm going to take a scoop of the eggplant, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little hole in there, and what I'm going to do is take 2 pieces of mozzarella, and I'm going to drop them in the center, and I'm going to close it up, and then I'm going to form the meatball, and then I'm going to put it in the breadcrumbs. So I put them over the top like that. And then I will put it on the tray like that. So let me make another one here. And then after we have it on the tray, we're going to go over to the stove and we're going to fry them on top of the stove. So we take our surprise here, we tuck it in, we close it up, we form our meatball into the breadcrumbs. Okay, and then here. So I'm going to continue making these eggplant meatballs, and then join me at the stove where we will fry them up. Stay with us. So we have our skillet on the stove, and we have some vegetable oil in it, about 1 inch of it, and it's coming up to temperature. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take the eggplant meatballs one at a time, and we're going to place them in, and that looks good. So we don't want to crowd them. And the idea is not to have it at full heat, because then you lose control of the frying. So I'm going to put several of them in, spaced out. And also, when these go in, the temperature will go down because these meatballs are on the cool side. And we're going to fry these off, and then when they're done, we're going to taste them. So stay with us. We're a little more than halfway through, and you can see the gorgeous browning that's happening on our eggplant meatballs. So stay with us. You will see them when they're done, and we'll give them a taste. So here we go. Here are some awesome looking eggplant meatballs. Don't they look great? Now, when we started out putting them in the fry pan, the first batch, the oil was not quite up to temperature. So this is what we got for that. Now, let me tell you, they're perfectly edible. because we tried some of them and they are delicious. And the second batch, the oil was up to temperature and they came out much better. So I'm going to taste this just to see how it is. It's delicious. Take a look. It is creamy, crispy on the outside. It's a great eggplant meatball. It even tastes a little bit like if you had eggplant parmesan, the eggplant with the melted cheese on it. The mozzarella melts in the middle and it's kind of gooey, so it's really good, so you should try it. So let's sort of recap what we did on this episode. We started out with a cauliflower meatball and that came out really nice. Then we did a spinach ricotta meatball and that also came out great. That was in the tomato sauce. And then we ended up with these awesome eggplant meatballs. So that's our second episode of the mini clinic for meatballs. There are so many more meatball combinations that you can try, and you should experiment, put together your awesome version of meatballs to see what you can come up with. So I want to thank you for joining me on this mini clinic on meatballs, and tune in for more sweets, treats, and eats. We'll see you then.